Welcome to the Rulebook Tavern Chronicles, where we are talking about role-playing games. Today, we will be diving deep into the Sorcerer class in Pathfinder 2e. Ever wished you could just be magic?
Yeah.
That's the Sorcerer in a nutshell.
They're the embodiment of raw magical power, often tied to a mystical ancestry or a life-altering event. Imagine having magic coursing through your veins, ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice.
Okay, let's break down how that actually works in the game. The rulebooks call this source of magic a bloodline. But it isn't always about literal blood, right?
Not necessarily. Think of it more as the origin point of their magic. A sorcerer's power could come from a dragon ancestor, a brush with the Fey realm, or even exposure to raw elemental forces. This bloodline doesn't just give them cool backstory flavor, though. It shapes their abilities and what kind of magic they excel at.
So you're saying it's more than just, oh, I have dragon blood, so I breathe fire. There's real depth to how the bloodline impacts their magical abilities.
Exactly. One of the most exciting things about sorcerers is their spontaneous spellcasting. Unlike wizards who meticulously prepare spells from their books, sorcerers tap into their innate power instinctively. They can choose the perfect spell for any situation on the fly.
That sounds both incredibly powerful and a little intimidating. What would you say are the biggest pros and cons for someone thinking about playing a sorcerer?
Well, that flexibility we just talked about is a huge pro. Imagine you're exploring a dungeon and suddenly you're ambushed. A sorcerer can react instantly, summoning a wall of fire or teleporting the party to safety. They're all about adaptability and reacting to whatever the GM throws at them.
So no more agonizing over which spells to prepare each day. You can just go with the flow, trusting your gut and your connection to magic. I like that. But you said there were cons.
Of course. There's always a trade-off in a well-balanced game like Pathfinder. The biggest downside for sorcerers is their limited spell selection compared to prepared casters like wizards. Wizards have those massive spell books to choose from, but sorcerers have to be very selective about what they learn.
So it's about specializing and really understanding the ins and outs of the spells you do choose. Makes sense.
Right. You have to make every spell choice count and think about how those spells will work together, especially when combined with your unique bloodline abilities. Speaking of bloodlines, did you find anything particularly interesting while you were prepping for this deep dive?
Oh, definitely. The blood magic options caught my eye. It's like sorcerers can manipulate their own life force to achieve incredible effects. There's one called Stolen Life, where they can either gain temporary hit points to stay in the fight or blast an enemy with void damage.
That's a fantastic example of how bloodlines can give sorcerers a unique edge. But let's unpack that a bit for our listener. Void damage is special because it bypasses a lot of the usual resistances and immunities creatures might have. It's like hitting them with pure anti-life energy. Very potent stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about extra hit points. It's about delivering a type of damage that can really mess up certain enemies.
Yep.
Sounds strategically powerful. But before we get too deep into combat tactics, let's talk about character creation. Where do you even begin with a class as unique as the Sorcerer?
Well, a good place to start is with Ancestry. And since we're focusing on the core rulebooks for this deep dive, let's see what player core 1 and 2 have to offer that would synergize well with a sorcerer's innate magic.
Perfect. What are some of your top picks and why?
Well, it depends on what kind of sorcerer you envision. Let's say you're drawn to a dragon bloodline. You want to embody that raw elemental power.
Oh, that sounds so cool. I can already picture myself as a powerful, dragon-touched magic user. But are there any ancestries that really make that concept shine?
Absolutely. If you're all about embracing the dragon theme, the Dragonborn heritage from Player Core 2 would be a perfect fit. Not only do they have that cool draconic look, but they also get a breath weapon that matches your bloodline's element.
So I could be a fire-breathing sorcerer with a fire-based breath weapon. That sounds awesome. But are there any other benefits to this ancestry? I mean, wouldn't it be kind of one-dimensional to just be all about the fire?
You bring up a great point. The Dragonborn heritage also gives you a bonus to saving throws against fear. You'd be a fearless, fire-breathing force of nature, which is pretty intimidating.
Okay, that's really cool. But let's say you want to play a sorcerer who's a little more on the subtle side. What ancestries would fit that playstyle?
Well, in that case, we need to look at ancestries that offer different strengths. For example, the elf ancestry from Player Core 1 is known for its mental resilience and inherent magical connection.
So an elven sorcerer could have a natural edge when it comes to resisting mental manipulation or magical effects.
That's a great point. It's not just about raw power, but about finding an ancestry that complements your playstyle and your chosen bloodline.
Exactly. Now, what about backgrounds? They add another layer of depth to your character, don't you think? Absolutely. Backgrounds are a fantastic way to flesh out a sorcerer's personality, provide them with some useful skills, and tie their story into their bloodline origin. For example, if you're playing a sorcerer with a mysterious or otherworldly bloodline, maybe they're descended from a celestial being, or their magic comes from a pact with an otherworldly entity, the occult background would be a perfect fit.
I like how you're connecting those dots. The occult background would provide them with knowledge of magical rituals, esoteric lore, and unusual languages. It could even give you clues about the true nature of your powers.
It's like their background becomes a key part of their magical journey. But what if you're going for a sorcerer who's more street smart? Maybe a little roguish.
Ah, for someone like that, the criminal background could be a great choice. It could grant them skills like deception or stealth, which would be valuable for a sorcerer who prefers trickery or subterfuge. Imagine a sorcerer who can blend into the shadows, then unleash a devastating spell when their enemies least expect it.
Okay, that sounds super cool. And you're right, it all ties back to storytelling and making choices that reflect the kind of sorcerer you want to play. But at the end of the day, it's all about the magic, right? So let's talk spells.
Absolutely. Spells are the bread and butter of any sorcerer, and choosing the right ones is essential. It's not just about picking spells you think sound cool or powerful, it's about synergy. You want to select spells that play to your bloodline strengths and enhance your preferred playstyle.
Okay, that makes sense. But with so many spells to choose from in the player cores, where do you even begin? What are some spells that stand out to you as particularly impactful or interesting for a sorcerer?
Well, there are the few that immediately spring to mind. Magic Missile, for example, is a classic for a reason. It's a great early game spell that allows you to target multiple enemies with a barrage of magical energy.
It's reliable, it's versatile, and it always hits. What's not to love?
Exactly. And as you level up, you can learn more potent spells that really showcase a sorcerer's unique power. One that's particularly thematic, especially for certain bloodlines, is Horrific Visage. Imagine your sorcerer suddenly transforms into a terrifying hag-like creature, scaring the wits out of their enemies.
That sounds amazing. It's like something out of a nightmare. But is it just a visual effect, or does it actually do anything mechanically?
Oh, it's definitely more than just a visual. The fear effect can be incredibly powerful in combat, causing enemies to become frightened and potentially flee. It's a great way to control the battlefield and turn the tide in your favor.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you're not just blasting your enemies with raw power, you're also playing mind games with them, using your magic to manipulate their emotions. I like
Great.
that. It adds another layer of depth to the sorcerer's toolkit.
Precisely. And speaking of enhancing your magical abilities, we can't forget about meta magic. These special feats allow you to tweak your spells in all sorts of fun and interesting ways.
Oh yeah, meta magic. I was looking at Reach Spell and Widen Spell in Player Core 1. Those seem incredibly useful, especially in combat. Could you give us an example of how they work?
Sure. So let's say you're facing a group of enemies huddled together. Normally, your fireball spell would only hit a small area, right?
Right.
But with Widen spell, you could expand that area of effect, catching more enemies in the blast.
Oh, I see. So it's all about maximizing your damage potential.
Exactly. And Reach spell lets you extend the range of your spells. So if an enemy is just out of reach for your shocking grasp, you can use Reach spell to close that gap and zap them.
Okay, those are some really cool examples. So you're not just limited to the basic effects of your spells. Meta magic allows you to customize them, making them more effective in different situations.
Yeah.
It's like you're a magical engineer tinkering with your spells to achieve the perfect result.
That's a fantastic way to put it, and it really speaks to the adaptability and versatility of the sorcerer class. They're not just about brute force magic, they're about understanding their powers and using them in clever ways.
So if you were giving advice to someone playing a sorcerer for the first time, what would be your top tips for really embracing the heart of this class?
Well, first and foremost, I'd say lean into the spontaneity. Embrace the fact that you're a conduit for raw, primal magic. Don't be afraid to let that influence your sorcerer's personality, their decisions, and how they interact with the world around them.
So it's not just about memorizing spells and rolling dice. It's about bringing that magical energy to life through role-playing and storytelling.
Exactly. And remember, you're not limited by the rules on the page. Use those rules as a foundation to build a character that feels real and engaging. Think about your sorcerer's history, their motivations, and how their magic has shaped their worldview.
Those are some great insights. I feel like I've learned so much about sorcerers today. What final thought would you leave our listener with as they embark on their own journey into the world of Pathfinder as a sorcerer?
I'd say don't be afraid to experiment. Try different bloodlines, explore various spell combinations, and find what resonates with you as a player. The Sorcerer class is all about embracing the magic that flows within you and letting it guide your path.
Well said. Hope you enjoyed this deep dive with us and see you soon to talk about other classes.